All right, it's a couple minutes after 1, so I'm going to get started because I know myself that when I'm on webinars like this, I don't like waiting around. So let's get started. So Nick, next slide. Our theme today, as everybody knows, is the economic, environmental, and energy potential of green hydrogen production, distribution, and use in New Jersey. And let me start off by thanking everybody for participating right now. And by the way, I am Chuck Feinberg. I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition, and I'd like to welcome everybody. I know there's been a lot of excitement about this event. At last check, we had over 225 names on our registration list. And I've gotten calls from at least 5 other entities asking to be added to the already full agenda. So it sounds like we have plenty of interest for a follow-on event already, and we're just starting this one. And it's very funny for me to say this, but it's really an exciting time to be in the energy business, especially here in New Jersey, because there's so much going on. And we have a great lineup today. We have experts in the production, distribution, and use of what I think will be an essential piece of the puzzle that will get the world to zero emissions, and what I think can establish New Jersey as an economic engine to doing so. Before we get to that, I want to thank the core team that picked up the slack for me in organizing this event while I have been dealing with the recent death of my father. Caroline McCallum and Nick Morando, thank you so much. This would not have happened without you guys stepping up, so thank you. And now to frame the rest of the afternoon for you, and I guess for some of you it's still morning, so here we go. This forum is intended to be what I think will be the start of a years-long conversation. The New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition, working with our partners at the New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and others, hopes to facilitate stakeholder interaction, leading to public-private project development. We want to discuss and advance the policy and regulatory support that's necessary to do so, and raise general awareness. We hope to provide an ongoing forum for discussion of these and related issues as the technology continues to rapidly advance. And of course, we hope to be able to see you all in person for our next session. You can go to the next slide, Nick. Hydrogen, and in particular, sustainably produced or green hydrogen, is enjoying unprecedented momentum across the world. New Jersey should not miss this opportunity to make hydrogen an important part of our clean and secure energy future. Over the next few years, global spending on hydrogen energy research, development, and demonstration by both governments and the private sector has risen significantly. The number of countries with policies that directly support investment in hydrogen technologies is increasing, along with the number of sectors they target. Next slide. As we will hear throughout this afternoon's forum, with increased availability and declining costs for renewable energy, particularly here in New Jersey, with solar and soon offshore wind, interest is growing in what many feel is the ultimate in sustainable energy. That is hydrogen that is produced using water electrolysis. There have been several major demonstration projects worldwide in recent years, and it seems like new projects are announced on an almost daily basis. Electrolyzers using renewable power could become a low-cost option for widespread use of hydrogen, even after taking into account the transmission and distribution costs of transporting it to the end users. As we'll discuss further, and as you see on this slide, the irony is that sustainably produced hydrogen is being made technically and financially feasible by our increased use and reliance on renewables, while at the same time, the use of sustainably produced hydrogen is being made even more necessary by the increased use and reliance on those same renewables. Ambitious, targeted, and near-term action is needed to further identify and overcome barriers and to reduce costs. Technologies already available today enable hydrogen to produce, store, move, and use energy in a wide variety of ways. Next. Hydrogen is already widely used in some industries. Next slide, Nick. But has not yet come close to its potential to support the necessary clean energy transition. Hydrogen can help tackle various critical energy challenges, and it offers ways to decarbonize a range of sectors, including chemical, iron, and steel production, each of which have been proven to be difficult to otherwise reduce emissions in a meaningful way. For hydrogen to make significant contribution, it must be sustainably produced at a lower cost, and it also must be adopted in sectors where it is almost completely absent at the moment. Hydrogen use today is dominated by industry, namely oil refining and the production of steel, ammonia, and other chemicals. Virtually all of this hydrogen is supplied using fossil fuels, so there is significant potential for emission reductions from clean hydrogen. In buildings, hydrogen could be blended into existing natural gas distribution networks with the potential for the direct use of hydrogen in boilers or fuel cells. In power generation, hydrogen has the potential to help with variable output from renewables, whose availability is not always well matched with demand. In fact, hydrogen is becoming one of the leading options for storing energy from renewables and looks promising to be the lowest cost option for storing electricity over long periods of time. Hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels can transport energy from renewables over long distances, and these fuels can also be used in gas turbines to increase power system flexibility. Next slide. In transportation, hydrogen is thought to be a more efficient means of providing fuel for heavy-duty transportation. While I believe that battery electric technology is perfect for the light-duty passenger sector, hydrogen long-haul trucks are quicker to refuel and can easily be refueled at depots. Electric batteries are heavy and take up valuable space that could be used for cargo. It's noteworthy to mention that several warehouses right here in New Jersey are currently using zero-emission hydrogen forklifts and other cargo handling equipment. I'll also note that shipping and aviation, which obviously are important to New Jersey's economy and environment, have limited low-carbon fuel options available and represent a tremendous opportunity for hydrogen and hydrogen-derived fuels. The time is right to pull together the stakeholders to tap into hydrogen's potential to play a role in a clean, secure, and affordable energy future. Next. There have been false starts for hydrogen in the past. This time, I think it will be different. The recent success of PV, wind, and light-duty battery electric vehicles have shown that policy and technology innovation can be agents of change. These changes seemed far-fetched when I and others started to talk about light-duty battery electric vehicles 12 years or so ago. However, with the increased recognition of the urgency of climate change mitigation, strong interest in green hydrogen as being the next necessary step on the path to net zero is coming from a diverse group of governments and companies, many of whom are represented with us today. Next slide. Stakeholders include renewable electricity suppliers, industrial gas producers, electric and gas utilities, auto and truck makers, oil and gas companies, engineering firms, and cities and states across the world. Green hydrogen has been in the news often lately. As you'll hear on our first panel, the Department of Energy is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into research and development of hydrogen-based technologies. And recently announcing a new DOE program to accelerate innovation and spur demand, Secretary Granholm said, clean hydrogen is a game changer. It will help decarbonize high-polluting, heavy-duty, and industrial sectors while delivering good-paying, clean jobs and realizing a net zero economy by 2050. Excuse me. There is more hydrogen in the universe than any other element, but hydrogen atoms do not exist in nature by themselves. To produce hydrogen, its atoms need to be decoupled from other elements. How this decoupling is done determines hydrogen energy sustainability. I've already spoken a lot about green hydrogen, but isn't hydrogen a colorless gas? Well, yes, it is colorless, invisible gas. But as most of you probably know, not all hydrogen is created equal. Keep in mind that hydrogen in itself is a clean fuel. Manufacturing hydrogen fuel, however, is energy intensive. While the definitions seem to vary, the discussion of the colors of hydrogen often include a full prism: green, pink, purple, red, yellow, white, turquoise, black, gray, blue, brown. As I'm sure you'll hear from the experts this afternoon, these characterizations, while colorful, do not recognize the carbon intensity values of these various hydrogens, and that they are almost always better than existing options. Most hydrogen today is considered black, brown, or gray. It is made via steam methane reforming, in which steam is used to produce hydrogen from natural gas or coal. So while the process produces a clean zero-emission fuel, it also produces significant amounts of earth-warming CO2, making it less than ideal choice for truly green energy future. Blue hydrogen is in every way the same as black, gray, or brown, but with one big caveat. The carbon emissions from hydrogen generation process would be greatly reduced by using carbon capture and storage. So while blue hydrogen would reduce the CO2 emissions, it cannot go nearly far enough to meet international guidelines for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Generating green hydrogen, in contrast, nearly eliminates all carbon emissions because it uses clean, renewable sources. As noted by the European Commission, the full life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of the production of renewable hydrogen are close to zero. So there you have it. That was my somewhat long-winded introduction and welcome. I'm a firm believer that there is no one particular fuel or technology that will fit in every situation. For the world to get to net zero or better, we will need a mix of solutions. That said, I'm very excited about today's topic and the extraordinary speakers we have lined up. As I said at the onset, I hope that this will be the start of an ongoing conversation. I should note that the speaker bios and the full agenda can be found on our website, njcleancities.org, and we will post the slides on that same site once they're done. And if we've done this right, I will also be able to post the recording of it. And I also want to note that no promises, but we hope to have time for Q&A. So if you do have any Q&A or chat, please use those functions on the Zoom webinar. And if we do not get to those questions and answers, we will certainly try to schedule another session so we can go through that and answer all those questions. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining us, and thank you to all those that have reached out to me during this difficult time for my family. It's my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of our first panel and my partner and technical advisor in organizing this conference, JoAnn Milliken. JoAnn, take it away.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to moderate this first panel. It's my honor, actually. First, a little bit of background on me. I was at the Department of Energy for over 20 years, and most of that time in the hydrogen and fuel cell program. I retired in late 2015 and formed the New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition in partnership with some other folks. So panel one will continue to look at the big picture that Chuck overviewed. Pete Devlin of the U.S. Department of Energy and Genevieve Saur of the National Renewable Energy Lab will talk about what's happening nationwide and perhaps touch on some global aspects. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about New Jersey. The New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition, next slide, please, Nick. is an ad hoc group that coordinates hydrogen and fuel cell activities within the state, that connects various stakeholders, serves as a resource, and educates and informs the public as well as policymakers about the status of the technologies and the benefits of the technologies. We have been working with Chuck and the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition for about 4 years or so in education and outreach activities, and we hope to continue to do that. Another collaborator was the Northeast Electrochemical Energy Storage Cluster. This was led by Joel Reinbold at the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technologies and funded by the Small Business Administration to examine the market potential of hydrogen fuel cell technologies in the state. So this map was generated by that analysis, and it shows sites where there are more than or almost 70,000 non-leasing fleet vehicles in the state, and almost 3,000 fuel cell buses that are centrally located, such that these applications could provide a potential early market for jumpstarting a hydrogen refueling infrastructure in the state. The analysts also looked at stationary applications for cells in the state. This map looks at or identifies sites where there are large energy users, and particularly those that need reliable power. So it includes hospitals, municipal buildings, supermarkets where they can't afford to lose refrigeration, schools, and some grid locations, as well as telecom sites where backup is needed. So these this analysis is a few years old. It was done in 2017, and obviously, as Chuck talked about, and as many speakers will talk about in a few minutes, the application landscape for hydrogen has broadened quite a bit. So that's not included in this analysis, and the analysis needs to be updated. However, it is recent enough that it could be used to guide the design and development of hydrogen and fuel cell projects in the near future in New Jersey. So another driver in New Jersey is environmental justice in its disadvantaged communities. And this includes especially Trenton and Camden, but also Newark and Cumberland County. This index was developed by the University of Michigan about 18 months ago. And they looked at a number of factors. Well, actually, they looked at 3 factors. They looked at income, poverty levels. They looked at health, such as life expectancy and low birth weight. And then they looked at mobility, social mobility, using intergenerational mobility estimates. And so they identified Trenton and Camden as significantly disadvantaged, or most disadvantaged, and Newark and Cumberland County as disadvantaged. Environmental justice is also a bigger driver now for the Department of Energy. And Pete and Genevieve are going to talk about not that, but I don't think, but hydrogen at scale projects. So on the next slide, I'm showing a snapshot. Next slide, please, Nick. A snapshot of projects in 5 states that include hydrogen in integrated energy projects. And so my hope is that New Jersey will be added to this list in the near future. And certainly New Jersey's leaders are interested in hydrogen. They recently formed the New Jersey Fuel Cell Task Force. Next slide, please, Nick. In June of 2020, the governor signed the bill into law. This bill was sponsored by several members of the state assembly and the Senate. The governor appointed members in January 2021 this year, and I'm honored to be among those appointees. We began our work led by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and Commissioner Shivakula in April. And we will be soliciting public feedback, public input as we pursue our mission to provide recommendations to the governor and the legislature. So also, I think the information at this forum will likely inform our efforts as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Pete Devlin. Pete Devlin is a former colleague and well, actually a current colleague. We work together at the Department of Energy. He's been there for more than 30 years, directing projects or programs that run the gamut from R&D to demonstration to deployment. And prior to that, he was in industry for 12 years. So he's got quite a bit of experience. Pete?
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Devlin. I work for the U.S. Department of Energy's Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office. I'm a Technology Development Manager in the Technology Acceleration Program, which is the ITRL demonstration kinds of projects that we oversee. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak with you today. I appreciate that. And it's always great to hear long-term colleague Joanne Milliken still in the hydrogen and fuel cell technologies world. So it's always good to hear that. Next slide, please, Nick. So big news. The president has announced a number of key elements. Probably the most important thing is an executive order was signed on day one, calling for 100% carbon-free electric sector. That's the electric grid nationwide by 2035. I'm not going to read these, but I'll point out a couple of things. Obviously, the carbon-free grid plays well into green hydrogen. If we can have renewable power, we can have renewable hydrogen through electrolysis. So that's very exciting news for us. It's a strong incentive and motivation to act globally. At the same time that we had our annual merit review, there was an announcement for something called Mission Innovation, Zero Emission Shipping. And the U.S. government is a co-lead with Denmark with the goal of coming up with transocean shipping technologies for propulsion that would be zero emissions. So that's very exciting, just getting underway. We're starting to lead globally in some of these key areas, in particular the heavy duty power systems that are particularly hard to decarbonize. So that's very exciting. Also want to point out, as Joanne and Chuck pointed out, that environmental justice is a high priority. I'll talk a little bit more about that. In our demonstrations, environmental justice areas are going to be one of the key considerations in any kind of siting. Next slide, please. So at our annual merit review, some of you are probably familiar with it, if not all of you, we have a review of all of our projects on the program every year that are peer reviewed by subject matter experts. This is a particularly exciting one this month because the Secretary of Energy announced the hydrogen shot, or the hydrogen energy earth shot. And what that means, I'll tell you a little bit more. We've now got the visibility we need all the way up through the Secretary of Energy and the President to really start to accelerate, turn up the game, if you will, hydrogen and fuel cell technologies throughout many different sectors. There's a fact sheet on our energy.gov site if you want to take a look at that. And there will be a hydrogen shot webpage by the end of this week. So lots of things are happening. We're planning an industry government summit by the end of August, where we'll be discussing things like electrolysis, advanced pathways, and deployment and financing as part of that summit. Next slide, please. So here's some quotes, one from the President basically calling on all of DOE to meet the challenge here and develop the innovations necessary for a clean, carbon-free energy system in the U.S. As I mentioned, this picture of Secretary Jennifer Granholm kicked off this and talked about all the different technologies, solar and wind, geothermal, that would play into some of the things that we work on. And we're starting to work with those offices a lot closer. So next slide. So the secretary gave us a challenge. Let's move back one, yeah, thanks. So as we all know, it's been a long-standing challenge to get the cost of hydrogen down to something that could be used for many, many different applications and sectors. So she calls on us to reduce the cost of hydrogen to $1 per 1 kilogram, which is equivalent to about equivalent to a gasoline gallon of energy. And we do that in 1 decade. This is a particularly big challenge. We have R&D and we have demonstration plans to get to under $2. So getting the rest of the way, we've done some analysis, and it's really up to demonstrations and industry deployments to get you the rest of the way. So the whole strategy is going to be around continue the R&D, aggressively move forward on electrolysis from green power, and also demonstrate electrolysis and green power in key areas to get the cost of green hydrogen down to where it could actually meet the $1 challenge. Then industry needs to kick in for about the last 50 or 75 cents to get to $1. We know we can get to $2. Next slide, please. So here's kind of a layout of the energy consumption currently, or 2019, and where renewable stands, and it continues to grow, but it needs to grow a lot faster. For what does that mean for hydrogen? We're working with particularly the Solar Energy Technologies Office and the Wind Energy Technologies offices in DOE to get their costs down. Solar Energy's come up with a very aggressive goal, going from 5 cents a kilowatt hour to 3 cents a kilowatt hour by 2025, and then 2 cents a kilowatt hour by 2030. We need that to have green hydrogen. We need really inexpensive, and we want renewable energy. So their wind and solar are key to making these things happen. Already mentioned that we're trying for an electric grid, a sector that's completely free of carbon. That includes things like carbon sequestration, and DOE's Office of Fossil Energy is very involved with that, as well as nuclear. So one of the priorities for all of us in DOE is to get more activities, projects, deployments, demonstrations into these environmental justice zones. And these are the zones where there are disadvantaged communities, both income and air emissions. And those two things are often very much aligned. So we'll be looking for that. EPA has an environmental justice zoning map that's very useful down to the county level. You should check that out and see where these zones are. And those are the areas that we're going to be focused on for demonstrations in the future. Next slide. So a lot of you may be familiar with this slide. First of all, there's over 10 million metric tons of hydrogen produced today. And there's many different studies and scenarios that show that it could grow by 5x in the next 10 years. So we focus a lot on light duty vehicles and transportation, and now we broaden it to all these other areas. We think that 10 million metric tons of hydrogen with the help of solar and wind deployments is very doable. And there's the numbers, a considerable number of jobs, revenue, greenhouse gas reductions, and even export potential. So some of our focus areas include, we're still involved with transportation, but our heavy focus is on heavy duty and road vehicles as well as marine and rail. These are the technology and application areas that really use a lot of diesel fuel, a lot of petroleum fuels. And so we really need to go after that to truly, push for decarbonization of the transportation industry. But also we're quite interested in metals production, in particular steel. If hydrogen is used for steel making, it dramatically reduces the carbon emissions associated with steel making. So that could be an opportunity as well. We're also very much interested in integrated energy systems. And what we mean by that is electrolysis from renewables that can be used to make energy, store energy using hydrogen, making hydrogen, storing it, and then using it for power as needed during the peaks and valleys of solar and wind and other renewable technologies. There's quite a lot of interest in that, and power companies and others in grid infrastructure world are very interested in us pursuing that with them. Next slide, please. So it's not just about the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office in DOE anymore. And it's a good thing because there's considerable money going forward in the budget request. The president's budget request for fiscal year 22 for hydrogen is $400.5 million across all these different offices. EERE, where we are, Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office, FE, Fossil Energy, NE, Nuclear Energy, and Office of Electricity, and ARPA-E, which is a special R&D group, are all contributing money or requesting money to contribute to pushing for green hydrogen. I also want to mention the Interagency Working Group. We're doing a number of collaborations, some of them in demonstration deployment. One in particular is building a heavy-duty truck. We call it the H2 the Rescue truck, and this truck is designed to provide relief for disaster areas, from fires, from hurricanes, tornadoes, natural disasters that occur. We're working with Army and DHS FEMA to develop this truck. Fuel cells provide the unique capabilities of exporting power. We'll have 25 kilowatts of exportable power and some water as well. So all of these offices are working together. We just launched a hydrogen program plan with all the offices contributing, and that includes things that we didn't really work on and haven't worked on, like combustion engines and turbines and things like that that would use hydrogen. So there's a much more comprehensive look now at how this can happen. Next slide, please. Okay, so in our office, we've had $150 million for the last 2 years, and now we're going to 197.5. It's important that you notice that gray bar, that's the systems development and integration part of the office. That's going from 51 to 81. And so that's where we do the advanced development and demonstration work. So that's a big jump, and we're hoping this request gets enacted and allows us to really ramp up in demonstration activities. We're involved with a lot of you and a lot of people in industry and universities, 190 companies, 109 universities, and all the national labs are contributing. Next slide, please. A little bit about what we've done. I won't read it, but the national labs, 35% of the patents are coming from the national labs. That's a notable accomplishment for them. over 1,000 patents, 30 technologies in the private sector being used currently, many more to come in the future. I'll point out a couple of them. First, our catalyst work is something that is of global interest. There's fuel cell developers in Europe and Asia that are working with us on developing the very best catalyst for PEM fuel cells. And electrolysis, we're moving into the megawatt scale now, not just small electrolyzers for retail stations for refueling, big ones, megawatts of electrolysis for some of these very large application areas. Forklifts, we've been working on that for a long time, and now we're watching the commercialization of that take off to an incredible level. Over 40,000 of them are in industry, and it's really a great success story in terms of commercialization. So it's been done before we can do it in these other sectors and applications too. I want to point out a hydrogen refueler. This refueling system is about the size of a very small car, and it's relatively easy to install. And it's called the Simple Fuel. Simple Fuel competed and won the H Prize, a prize that we give out for companies willing to risk $1 million worth of development, and they won that prize, and now they're deploying these systems that use electrolysis in other countries as well as in the US, Japan. We just installed one at the National Park Service here in DC to do demonstrations, and that's another example of industry working with us to get a simplified version of a hydrogen refueling and dispensing system. Next slide, please. So a lot of good things have happened in production. Electrolysis has been, the cost of an electrolyzer system has been reduced dramatically. You can see the numbers there. But to get where we need to go with green power and hydrogen, we need to get to that $250 to $300 a kilowatt. And that's going to take a lot of effort, both in research and development and demonstration. So that's a big challenge that we have. Fuel cells, we focused for many years, JoAnn, you'll remember this, on light-duty vehicles, and they became a success. Now we're focusing on heavy-duty applications, and that makes it more difficult because we need more robust membrane electrode assemblies and everything that goes into them. They have to last a lot longer. So we've introduced a initiative called the 1 million mile truck, and our R&D developers are working on the durability necessary to get to 1 million miles for a Class 8 long haul truck. Everything from catalysts to membranes and all the accompanying equipment around that stack need to be more robust and durable to make that happen. Storage for gaseous storage and liquid continues to need to go down to about half of what it is today. So that's another big challenge we have. Next slide, please. So what do we got so far? There's over 8,000 backup power systems around the country, primarily for backup power for cell towers. Already mentioned forklifts, huge success in industry. Very happy about that. PEM electrolyzers, we need to ramp that up quite a lot. Buses are being bought and put into commercialization by individual transit authorities. For years, it was a DOT, Federal Transit Authority effort, and now it's up to the local transit authorities, which they are doing to continue that commercialization. California continues to be a great partner, still building stations. for light duty, working with us on some heavy duty things as well. And the Northeast is starting to get their stations put in place. I think you'll hear about that later today. And many other states have plans for rolling out big hydrogen programs. So we got 1,600 miles of pipeline in the U.S., and most of them are in the Gulf Coast area of Texas and Louisiana. We need to learn from that and figure out a way to develop pipelines that connect major cities and ultimately the whole country. There's some key areas. I'll touch on it in a minute. New projects. We've got one in the little box there around the San Francisco Bay Area for marine. It will be a barge, a floating refueling station, if you will, for starting with ferry boats. This is a very large project. It's got a 1.5 megawatt electrolyzer that will be on the barge, making about 500 kilograms a day. And that will be used to refuel this ferry boat. Another big area is data centers, backup power for data centers. We've started another project up in Washington State. It's going to be at a Microsoft data center run by Caterpillar, company Caterpillar. 1.5 megawatt fuel cell system to serve as backup for that data center. The data center community and industry is quite interested in hydrogen fuel cells for all of their centers. So that's another exciting area. The orange boxes are for I mentioned integrated energy systems. These are systems that use renewable or non-carbon sources, makes hydrogen to store, and then use it to level the loads for the grid. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but those are three exciting projects that are in their second year currently. Next slide. So forklifts, we started, and JoAnn, you'll remember this, we started with 4 sites at data centers for the Department of Defense back around 2002 and 3 and 4, with about 90 forklifts using different ways to make the hydrogen on site or trucked in. Then we went to the Recovery Act and deployed with industry 50-50 cost shares, about 900 of them. And now there's 40,000 of them in commercial use with over 20 million refuelings performed. There's one done every 7 minutes is what I'm told, a refueling of a forklift. And this proves that, fuel cells work and we can refuel in a very safe way continuously to support these kinds of industries and applications. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Pete.
Yeah.
Hi. So, yeah, we need to leave some time for Genevieve, and I was hoping we do have one question that I think requires answering.
Okay. So let me finish up quick.
Okay.
We've already talked about backup power. We're working with the U.S. Maritime Administration. We did a pier-side power system there, and now we're doing a shore power system also with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Next slide. So I'll point out some things I haven't pointed out before. The UPS truck, in collaboration with California Air Resources Board, is deploying 15 of them in an environmental justice area in Southern California. The ferry boat is being developed by California Air Resources Board and industry, and our floating refueling system will provide fuel for that. San Bernardino County Transit Authority is building a first of its kind in the U.S. Commuter rail system using fuel cells and a self-propelled car. So quite a lot happening in transportation. I didn't mention heavy duty, but Port of Los Angeles and Toyota, many of you already know, has already started demonstrating drayage trucks. Next slide, please. So I'll just hit the things that we haven't yet. So those orange boxes we showed you a minute ago, one of them is in Texas. and using a variety of different ways to make the hydrogen. We're also working with Nuclear Office and co-funding a demonstration project using megawatt scale electrolyzers for making power through nuclear. The data center I've already mentioned. I do want to mention the workforce development. We just started a new project called H2 Edge with EPRI, that's the Electric Power Research Institute, and developing curricula for training at various levels, vocational, undergraduate, and graduate. Next slide. Please. Okay. So there's money out there for loans. A lot of these types of technology demonstrations don't avail themselves to getting private financing, but there is money in DOE. These would need to be very big projects in order to really justify the due diligence, but there's, $17.7 billion in vehicle manufacturing, 4.5 in renewable. There's the guy in charge of it all. You can contact them in that website there if you have an idea. And I want to get to the last slide and ask you guys a favor. So up on the left top there, you'll see request for information. We don't have a full funding opportunity announcement out right now, but we plan to do it. And all these things I just talked about, these new ideas, we really need your ideas to get successful demonstrations underway. So if you could take some time, write a couple paragraphs or something on your idea and put it in through that link there, that would be great. That helps inform us on what people are thinking are good demonstration topics and allows us to go forward with funding opportunities. Tomorrow, I just want to mention one more thing. There will be an energy Earthshot hydrogen briefing at 12 noon through H2IQ. If you want to listen in on that, it'll be an hour-long session. You'll hear some more about the energy Earthshot and our plans for that. And don't forget Hydrogen Day, atomic weight of hydrogen, October 8th. We'll be having events on that, and we hope you are going to have events on that too. And so thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I'll turn it over back to JoAnn.
Thank you, Pete. Kyle has generously given us a little extra time since we're going to be missing one speaker today, who had to cancel at the last minute. And this is a question that we get often, and so I'm going to read it to you or summarize it, and then I may add to your answer if you don't mind. But driving a car with green quote unquote hydrogen-based fuels requires 5 times more energy than a battery electric car. As a result, they recommend prioritizing hydrogen-based fuels to applications for which they are indispensable: long-distance aviation, feedstocks of chemical production, steel production, and potentially some high-temperature industrial processes. Therefore, why should we invest in 5 times as much clean energy generation to produce hydrogen for transportation sectors that can otherwise be electrified?
Okay, so that 5 times is from the plug to the wheels. You've got to look upstream. Some of the power systems are down in the low 20s at best. So a total is not 5 times. It is more energy efficient for a battery light duty car from well or from source to wheels, for sure. But our focus now is not light duty for your average driver, but special longer distance kinds of surface transportation. For example, over half the bus routes in the country require longer distances than a pure battery regenerative braking bus can provide. So there's a large niche for hydrogen fuel cells to participate in surface transportation. Same with long haul trucks. You would have to store way too many batteries on board the truck and lose cargo space if it was an all battery electric truck. And so there's a unique opportunity for hydrogen to provide an all electric hydrogen fuel cell for those kinds of duties. And I agree, there's many other uses of hydrogen that there is no other solution. And so things like steel making, even ammonia, decarbonizing ammonia making and usage, and maritime are all possibilities.
Thanks, Pete. I would like to add that I think a couple of the car companies would tell you that they like to provide their customers with many options, and there are customers who prefer the longer driving range and the shorter refueling time that fuel cell electric provide. And I'm one of them personally. Battery electric vehicles don't meet my needs yet. They may in the future, but they don't yet. So, and Assemblyman Conaway has made a few comments and questions, and I think we should address them, or at least one of them. We can get back to him on the other one. Discuss the environmental impact of battery production on the scale required to decarbonize the transportation sector. So I think he's pointing out that that might be an issue. And Pete, I don't know if you are able to answer that, or if we should get back to him on that.
Yeah, I'm not able to answer that. I will say that our Vehicle Technologies Office at DOE is very aware, and they have a large initiative underway for recycling lithium-ion batteries to lower the impacts on the environment. And that's about all I can say. Okay,
good. We'll get back to you, Assemblyman Conaway. And Genevieve is typing an answer to your second question on the demonstration projects and nuclear hydrogen production. So now I'm going to introduce Genevieve while she's typing her answer, or she may type it later. Genevieve is with the National Renewable Energy Lab. She's been there for a long time. She's worked in many different energy efficiency and renewable energy programs and systems, including more than 10 years in NREL's fuel cell technology demonstration and validation program. So Genevieve, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Hi, sorry, I was right in the middle of typing. So thank you, Joanna. So yeah, I'm Genevieve Saur, and I work at the National Renewable Energy Lab, and I've been working in hydrogen about 13 years now. I work on a range of hydrogen and fuel cell analysis. I'm an engineering, research engineering analyst. And one of my focus areas is on the use of real world data sets to inform both research and other stakeholders in the industry. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at the lab and also how it intersects with deployment in the real world. And you know, we're just one of the national labs, but other national labs also have projects and integration with these things. Oh, the next slide. Thanks. Forgot I didn't have control. So this is just a little kind of grounding for what I'll be talking about. And this is the market potential based on the cost of hydrogen. So right now, the previous goal for the Hydrogen Fuel Cells Technologies Office was the $2 per kilogram production cost. And that would enable significant demand in the medium and heavy duty vehicles, as well as sustainable aviation fuels and some in ammonia. And one of the reasons that the $1 per kilogram is really important is that it will unlock a lot of potential into areas like synthetic fuels, chemical processing, iron and steel making, blending into the natural gas infrastructure, as well as long duration energy storage. So this is just to kind of, base why the cost of hydrogen is important, and, also where deployment can happen. Next slide. So the cost of hydrogen is a really big challenge, as Pete mentioned. And so there's a few, one of the areas that is, the offices are working on a range of different technologies, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about electrolytic hydrogen production, specifically the low temperature electrolysis, which could have applications in a lot of distributed hydrogen production applications. And there's kind of four main ways that the cost can be reduced. One of these is just access to inexpensive renewable electricity. that especially sources that may be constrained or have excess, and maybe the prices are lowered by also by having provisions to the valuation of grid services. So areas where we can lower the electricity cost. And that's sort of outside of the realm of hydrogen research and deployment specifically, because it's based a little bit more in other industries as well as policy and regulation. The areas that we can maybe affect more are R&D, research and development improvements to both the stack as well as the balance of plant, both in terms of efficiency and cost. So those are the things that, you know, both industry and research institutions can take on. And then there's two that are more along the lines of that are driven by deployment. And this is cost reductions from high volume manufacturing, where you get economies of scale. And the only way you get that is by increasing deployment. And then the kind of fourth area that needs to be reduced is a reduction of the operating and maintenance costs. And two of the ways of doing that is by component reliability. So making sure that, you know, your maintenance costs are reduced, as well as just workforce development and a network of crews that can manage this. Next slide. So this is just another analysis from H2 at scale. And this is not based on the cost of hydrogen, but only on just the potential for hydrogen introduction into different markets. And so the analysis suggests that the market potential is about 10 times more than what we're seeing today by 2050. And this covers a number of different areas, from refineries and chemical processing to metals productions, ammonia, bio and syn fuels, natural gas supplementation, as well as seasonal energy storage for integrating higher renewable penetration. And then on the transportation side, this shows the potential for the light duty fuel cell vehicles, as well as heavy and medium duty vehicles. And I would add to this, and it's not explicitly written in, but I think aviation and marine applications are also areas that will have a significant potentials. Next slide. So NREL engages with different stakeholders through a consortium approach that spans the national labs. And so there's five areas that we think about is the make. You know, we're making hydrogen, and this is, we engage through a newly launched H2 New for new water electrolysis, as well as the Hydrogen 2.0, which looks at more emerging technologies. Move is supported by High Blend, which is looking at natural gas blending and kind of pipeline infrastructure, as well as the High Mark, which is looking at storage and transportation of hydrogen through different kinds of carriers and materials. And then the use is supported in ways by what Pete mentioned, the million-mile fuel cell truck, and looking at the kind of trucking industry, as well as Electrocat, which does a lot of fuel cell work. And then there will be some new kind of consortium to kind of engage stakeholders. And then all of these kind of programs are then supplemented by cross-cutting analysis that kind of helps to bring everything together. Next slide. So just to kind of look a little bit at what some of NREL's capabilities, NREL has a new capability called the Advanced Research on Integrated Energy Systems. And this is at the redeveloped Flatirons campus, which had previously been the National Wind Technology site. And so this is going to look at really multi-megawatt integration, tightly integrated systems. It includes wind and solar resources that can be used, as well as right now it's a 7 megawatt controllable grid interface, which is going to be upgraded to 20 megawatts. And this is for really integrating the testing of both real and simulated elements into an integrated system. So this is going to be a really fantastic resource available. And then right in development and kind of in construction right now, starting now, is there's going to be megawatt scale hydrogen system integration. So that's going to be 1.25 megawatts of PEM electrolysis, compression up to 3,000 PSI, possibly more in the future, as well as 600 kilograms of storage and a 1 megawatt fuel cell. And so all of these systems are can be used within integrated testing of components, of systems, and a variety of different things before they go really out into the world. So this is where we can validate and test these integrated systems. And then there's already in the works, this is going really quickly, but there's also further improvements that are going to look at the natural gas hydrogen blending aspects. We'll be looking at flex fuel turbines, as well as the refueling infrastructure for trucking. And a big part of that is the throughput. It's a much higher throughput at 10 kilograms per minute. Next slide. So one of the areas that we supplement a lot of the analysis is through the National Fuel Cell Technology Evaluation Center. And this provides independent analysis of real world data sets and while protecting the data sources. So this kind of complements a lot of the experimental work as well as informing stakeholders in deployment projects. So this is an example of one of the types of what we call composite data products. And this is around the maintenance events at refueling stations. Right now, the two active projects are around the light hydrogen refueling stations, as well as fuel cell electric buses are two of the projects that we're working on right now. In the past, we've also, we have data out for fuel cell electric vehicles, forklifts, stationary and backup fuel cell power, as well as lab data sets. So this is sort of a complement to some of the other types of work that we do. Next slide. This is an example of some of the collaboration projects that we work on. This is a CRADA project called Innovating Hydrogen Stations, and it's really aimed at looking at what it's going to take to quickly refuel heavy and medium duty trucks and buses. So the objective of the project is to get experimental data for the 10 kilograms per minute average refueling rate. And this is a pretty big step for the industry. As an example, right now the refueling stations that are servicing mainly light duty vehicles in California achieve about 1 kilogram per minute. So this is, a big step for the industry and an important development for deploying these technologies. Next slide.
Excuse me, Genevieve, we need to wrap up in about 1 minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
We also look at electrolyzer integration with battery electric. So this is an example of some looking at kind of highly integrated scenarios and how electrolyzers can help stabilize your grid while also providing other services to the electric infrastructure. Next, I'll just go through them pretty quickly. This was a question in the chat. So we do have experimental work on biomethanation with electrolytic hydrogen. So this is looking at renewable natural gas, basically production of that. Next slide. We have analysis. This is some of our cross-cutting analysis that we're doing. NREL and Argonne National Lab is doing on exports. So we're looking at how and where the production capacities are for producing, as well as the infrastructure needed to do export to in a kind of global hydrogen commodity trade. Next slide. And then just to, a lot of people may already realize this, but NREL maintains kind of the largest repository of geographic data on renewable resources. And so this is one example looking at offshore wind speeds and offshore wind depth, water depths. So kind of how you might promote kind of offshore wind. And then in the next slide, I have a preliminary analysis for an integrated offshore wind electrolysis system. And in this particular analysis, we analyzed a site near Boston and found that we could get potentially about $2.17 a kilogram at the shore. And there's a bunch of different areas that this is looking at, including distributed, integrated into the wind turbine, central production offshore, as well as central production onshore. And I think one of the lessons that I looked at is that some of the hydrogen infrastructure may be less expensive than some of the electrical infrastructure for these offshore wind turbines. And especially when you're talking about the pipeline of hydrogen to shore for some of the more distant offshore wind sites, this may become an economic solution for exporting their energy.
We need to wrap up, Genevieve. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, well, so the slides will be available and people will be able to see your last slide on funding. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but
that's okay.
Run out of time, and I don't really see any questions in the Q&A section. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chuck.